We are going to dismiss the children to Children's Church now. So if you are one of our Children's Church volunteers this week, please stand up so that the children can make their way over to you now. This is yet another week that I didn't think of a joke or a story or anything like that to fill the dead space while the kids are making their way back there. So just real quick, pretend that I had something clever to say just now. There we go. Well, I'm so glad to see everybody again this morning. It has been a great week, and I'm excited to be here together, worshiping the Lord by studying His Word together once again. And I'm unbelievably excited to continue on in our new series through the book of Proverbs. I've been preparing for this series for about 6 months. I think it might have been longer, to the point that people who heard me talk about it way back when I first started prepping were like, so you start in Proverbs or what? As the months went by. But I'm unbelievably eager to dive into it, because the things that we're going to talk about throughout this series are going to be some of the most important things that we've ever talked about and studied together. And so I am stoked. Last week, we introduced the book of Proverbs and we just set the stage a little bit. We talked about the fact that Proverbs are kind of like God's fatherly instruction to us. Remember that? Talked about the fact that when we open up the Proverbs, it's kind of like our Father God sitting us down in the living room to have a really important but kind of uncomfortable conversation with us. The Proverbs are one of the places in Scripture where God shares His fatherly wisdom with us. He gives us fatherly advice the same way that a human father who loves his children will go out of his way to teach his children what he knows. He will teach his children the things that he's learned throughout his years on earth. He will teach his children the wisdom that he's acquired, because he wants his children to be prepared for the gauntlet that is this life on earth. And he wants his children to be blessed instead of cursed. That's what's happening here in the Proverbs. And over these next several months that we're gathering together each week to open up the Proverbs and dive deep into this fatherly advice and wisdom that God has for us here together. And if we seriously take hold of this fatherly advice that God offers to us in the Proverbs, and we pour ourselves into applying His guidance here in our lives, then I promise you that your life will be better at the end of this series than it is right now at the beginning. It's a big promise, but I'm standing by it. If you seriously take hold of this fatherly wisdom God offers in the Proverbs and you apply it to your life will be better at the end of this Proverbs series than it is right now at the beginning. That is the journey that we are going on over these next several months, and I cannot wait to take this journey together. And so last week, we just kind of laid down some of the groundwork and set some of the stage and talked about a little bit of the context that the Proverbs are happening in. But today, we want to set the foundation. Starting next week, we're going to be looking at what God has to say to us in the Proverbs about so many different issues we face in life. Things like how to find worthwhile friends, how to manage money and stay out of crushing debt, how to find a good partner or spouse, and stuff like that. But before we can get into those specific issues, we have to talk about the heart of the book of Proverbs. We have to talk about the ground floor that all the rest of this is built up on. Because at the very core of the book of Proverbs, there is this lingering question that runs through every single verse. And that lingering question is, what does it mean to be wise? And how can I become wise. You know what I'm talking about? The Proverbs ask the question, what does it mean to be wise? And how can I become wise? Maybe that sounds like a dumb question. Maybe you don't really care about that issue. Maybe your perspective is, I don't care about being wise. I just want to be happy, right? I don't care about being wise. I just want to have a good time for however many years I have on this earth. And if that is you, I pray that the Lord will change your heart and change your desires. I pray that He will give you a deep desire to become wise. I pray that whatever your starting point is this morning, the Lord will compel you from deep within yourself to desire wisdom and to want to learn to be wise. And we're going to spend this morning talking about what that means and how to do that. And so let's dive straight in and start exploring that question together. What does it mean to be wise, and how can I become wise? Are you ready? Here we go. The first thing we need to understand this morning is that the Proverbs tell us there are three kinds of people, and everyone on earth is one of them. Know where we're going with this? There are three kinds of people, and everyone on earth is one of them. You are one of these three kinds of people. So as we're going, you can tag yourself or something. Because the first kind of person that the Proverbs tell us about is the kind of person that it calls the simple. Some people are simple. Now, when the Proverbs refer to someone as the simple, it's not an insult. It's not taking a swipe at you. When the Proverbs talk about the simple, they're talking about most of the people on planet Earth. Most of the people in the world are what the Proverbs call the simple. So, what is a simple person? The Proverbs say that a simple person is someone who is inexperienced, maybe naive, someone who lacks discernment, someone who lacks understanding. And because that is true, a simple person is very easily steered onto the wrong path. Know what I'm talking about? Now, obviously, a young person is going to be simple, but it's not just young people. Middle-aged people can be simple. Older people can be simple, right? They are just as likely to be what the Proverbs are talking about when they call a person simple, because simple is what you're born as. You were born simple. And so it's really important to understand that a simple person is not malicious. A simple person is not necessarily bad. They're not necessarily evil, but the simple are often self-destructive. They're constantly falling into harmful or self-destructive patterns. They're easily misled. They're easily drawn into foolishness. Remember last week we talked about the pole of foolishness, right? The spirit of foolishness is constantly trying to draw us towards itself. Remember that? So that we follow after foolishness instead of wisdom. The Proverbs tell us that the simple are really low-hanging fruit. The simple are really easy fish to catch. And the Proverbs were written for the simple. So, if you just recognized yourself just now as I was describing the simple person, you were like, oh no, that's me. I got good news. The Proverbs were written for you. Proverbs 1 says that all of this was written in order to what? To give prudence to the simple, to give knowledge and discretion to the youth. That is number one. Most people, most of us, are simple. But at the same time, the Proverbs talk about a second type of person. And on the surface, this second type of person looks very similar to the simple person. But once you get down to the rest of the iceberg, they're completely different. Because at exactly the same time as all this, the Proverbs talk about someone called the fool. And the fool could not be more different from the simple. Because a simple person is just someone who lacks wisdom. But the fool is someone who rejects wisdom. The Proverbs tell us that the simple is someone who just lacks understanding. But the fool is someone who rejects understanding. The simple person lacks discernment, but the fool rejects discernment. The fool is someone who has committed themselves to a life of foolishness. The fool is someone who rejects instruction. The fool is someone who demands their own way. The fool is someone who refuses to take responsibility, who ignores and rejects God's design for the universe. Just listen to what the Proverbs say about this type of person called the fool. I'm going to waterboard you with some verses from Proverbs real quick. Are you ready? I'm not. Okay, now I'm ready. Are you ready? Okay, so Proverbs 19:2 says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." You've been in school recently. You had a classmate like that, right? Proverbs 29:9 says, "If a wise man has an argument with a fool, the fool only rages and laughs, and there is no quiet." Proverbs 18:6 says, "A fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating." We're not done. Proverbs 14:7-8 says, "Leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not meet words of knowledge. The wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way, but the folly of fools is deceiving." Proverbs 10:23 says, "Doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding." Listen to that. That is scathing, right? A fool is somebody who is not just unintelligent. There are people who are not that smart, but who are actually pretty wise. You know what I'm talking about? A fool is not somebody who's just unintelligent. It's not just somebody with a low IQ. A fool is someone who has become malignant. The Proverbs say that a fool is someone you cannot reason with. A fool is someone you literally cannot have a rational conversation with. It's impossible to convince a fool of anything because they are so caught up in their own foolishness that they don't have room for anything else in their brain. They are willingly ignorant, willfully, purposefully ignorant. The Proverbs say that a fool is someone who has lost the ability to reflect on themselves. You know what I'm talking about? A fool is someone who's lost the ability to examine themselves. A fool has lost the ability to stop and ask himself, am I right or wrong? Am I doing good or bad? Am I speaking the truth or am I distorting the truth? These things have lost all meaning to a fool. You know what I'm talking about? They say that a fool is almost compulsively combative. His mouth invites a beating. I know a few people like that, right? A fool is incapable of pursuing wisdom or looking for the truth or having an adult conversation or calmly working through something with somebody else, because in their mind, everything is a zero-sum fight. The moment you disagree with them, they declare war. Everything is a battle. They're incapable of letting things go. A fool is like a human wrecking ball. A fool is like a bull in a china shop. And because all of that is true, the Proverbs say that a fool is someone you just need to stay away from. It says there is nothing valuable you can learn from a fool, because everything a fool says is ultimately deceptive. Like, even if they mix a little bit of truth in with it by accident, it's so tangled up in nonsense and deception that even trying to listen to them leaves you worse off than you were before. And so the best thing you can do when you are confronted with a fool is just leave their presence. Just get away from them. Move away from them if you need to, right? Like, change states so that you're no longer in their web of influence. If you need to, just keep them out of your life, because a fool will have the same effect on your life as a dirty syringe will. Letting a fool into your life is like sticking some homeless guy's used meth needle into your arm. You have nothing to gain. It's just going to infect you. That is a fool. And so the obvious question that we need to ask here is this. How do you get like this? You don't get like this overnight, do you? But you get like this over years of rejecting instruction. You get like this over years of refusing to take responsibility for yourself. You get like this over years of ignoring God's design for the universe and rejecting God's desire for your life. You become a fool slowly and methodically as year after year you commit just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more to your own foolishness, until one day you've drifted so far you no longer recognize the difference between what's wise and what's stupid. What's true and what's false. What's good and what's bad. What's right and what's wrong. That's the fool. And the Proverbs are written to show the bankruptcy of living like this. That's number 2. But there's one more type of person that the Proverbs talks about, and you can probably guess exactly where we're going with this. Because at exactly the same time as all of this, the Proverbs talk about a person that they call the wise. The Proverbs sketch out this image of what it looks like to be a wise person. And this image that the Proverbs give of wisdom is absolutely beautiful. Because the best way to define a wise person, I think, is this. A wise person is someone who lives out of an awestruck reverence for the Lord that drives them to seek God's will and design for every part of life. Remember last week we talked about something called the fear of the Lord? It's not the kind of fear you experience on Halloween, right? It's a different thing. But a wise person is someone who fears the Lord in a way that causes them to want guidance, to desire guidance. A wise person is someone who wants to learn and grow. So the Proverbs tell us that a wise person is the opposite of a fool, right? A fool has committed to a life of foolishness, but a wise person has committed to a life of learning and growing. A foolish person is committed to a life of rejecting instruction, but a wise person is committed to a life of seeking out understanding. A foolish person just wants to stay the way they are and be left alone, but a wise person wants to grow and become better. But a wise person is not a special class of person that's up here above all the others. No, a wise person is someone who started out as a simple person. That's the most important thing I'm going to say this morning. A wise person is someone who started out as a simple person, but who did the work to grow. And the Proverbs are written in order to teach us how to do that. They ask, how do I become wise? And there's about 1 million things that we could say in response to that question. But the Proverbs distill the answer into something unbelievably simple. The Proverbs break down the essence of wisdom into exactly 10 words. Are you ready for them? Here we go. To become wise, we have to learn to accept correction. I'm going to give you a second to count those words because I know you're curious if it's actually 10. Now you know. So, to become wise, we have to learn to accept correction. Real quick, let's all say this all together, just to burn this into our heads. It's been a while since I made us say something all together during a sermon, right? Let's fix that. Are you ready? To become wise, we have to learn to accept correction. Let's break that down just a little bit, because there's a few moving parts that are involved in this. Because when I say that we have to learn to accept correction, that involves a handful of different things. I'm going to run through them as quickly as possible. Number one, when I say that we have to learn to accept correction, I mean that we have to accept that we know very little. Know what I'm talking about? We have to accept that we know very little. I love the way that Proverbs 10:17 puts this. It says, people who listen when they are corrected will live, but those who will not admit that they are wrong are in danger. That's about as clear as you can put it, right? I'm going to say this all again. You cannot gain wisdom if you're convinced that you are always right. You cannot gain wisdom if you are convinced that you are always right. Now, some of us don't even realize that we think we're always right. You know what I'm talking about? I would never consciously say, I, Ryan Ellington, am always right. But when it comes down to it, I pretty much always think I'm right. Can anybody relate to that? I'm admitting to a flaw here. It is stupid for me to do that. And it's stupid for you to do that. But my natural tendency, and maybe yours as well, is to assume that I'm right and they're wrong all the time. My natural tendency is to assume that I know what's best and everybody needs to shut up and listen to me. But here's the thing. I'm wrong a lot. I'm wrong about things a pretty good portion of the time. Thanks, Randall. I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes. There are major things I have never even considered that cause me to be wrong about a lot of things. A whole lot of times, my perspective is flawed or skewed or incomplete. And that's true not only of me, but of every single person on planet Earth. Like, there are things that your parents understand that you just don't. There are things that your friend understands that you just don't. There are things that medical experts understand that you just don't. I pissed a handful of you off just now. There are things that scientists understand that you just don't. I just upset another group of you, right? There are things that older people are going to understand that you as a younger person just do not. And at the same time, there are things that people who are 20 or 30 years old today, trying to make it in the job market, trying to make it in the housing market, and so forth, understand that you, who grew up 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, do not understand. Know what I'm talking about? I know this is not, I'm not talking about a group of people who's in here right now. Like, if a person came home from World War II back in the mid-20th century and bought a house on a single income where they worked at a sheet metal factory and then had 4 kids and raised them all and sent them all to college on their one income, then you do not understand what it's like for people in their 20s or 30s today. And a lot of the advice that you think you have for how to get ahead and stuff like that does not work anymore. It worked in the 80s. It doesn't work in the 2020s because it's a totally different ballgame. There are some things you just don't know. There are some things we just don't know. And the only way to become wise, no matter how old you are, is to learn to accept that fact. Learning to accept correction means accepting that we know very little. That is number one. It's only going to get more brutal from here. Because that leads directly to number two. And that is that we need to look for wise people who can counsel us. Know what I'm talking about? We need to look for wise people who can counsel us. Here's the truth. You probably don't need to join another Bible study group right now. You need to find a mentor. You probably don't need to read yet another Christian book from the Christian Living section of Barnes & Noble right now. You need to find a mentor. You probably don't need to start listening to yet another famous preacher on YouTube or Spotify right now. You need to find a flesh and blood mentor that you can meet with regularly, who can invest in you and disciple you and teach you what they know. Proverbs 15:12 says, conceited people do not like to be corrected. They never ask for advice from those who are wiser. In other words, stupid people never look for advice and guidance, but wise people do exactly that. Proverbs 25:12 says, a wise correction to a receptive ear is like a gold ring or an ornament of gold. If you want to become wise, what you need is for an experienced person to guide you. You need to sit under the guidance of someone wise and discerning and understanding and be willing to listen. You need to look for wise people who can counsel you. That's number two. The single most important thing you can do on the path to wisdom is look for wise people who can counsel you. And that leads us directly to number three, which is that we need to surround ourselves with people who are willing to correct us. I'm going to give you a second one, Ellen. We need to surround ourselves with people who are willing to correct us. You don't just need one mentor who will guide you once a week when you meet up at Bojangles. You need a village of people. You need a community of people. Proverbs 11:14 says, when there is no counsel, people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. To become wise, we have to surround ourselves with people who are willing to correct us. Here's what that means in practical terms. Your friend group should not be made up of yes men. Your friend group should not be made up of yes men. Your people should not just be composed of folks who kind of nod along to whatever insane nonsense you're talking about at any given time. You know what I'm talking about? If your people aren't willing to challenge you, they don't actually love you. We're going to talk about this more next week. But if your people never confront you about your BS, they don't actually care about you. Like when you're thinking about leaving your wife because your 20-year-old secretary bats her eyes at you every day at work, you need your friend at the gym to tell you to pull your head out of your, I'm going to move on. Go back home to the woman that's your own age at home and start washing the dishes more often or something like that, right? When you're thinking about quitting your job with no alternative lined up because you don't like the atmosphere at your workplace, you need your friends to be there and ready to say, whoa, you need to hold on until you got a sure thing set up on the other side. You need to stick with this for now, even if it's unpleasant, because if you quit now without a backup plan, things are way more likely to get worse than to get better. You know what I'm talking about? You need a multitude of counselors. You need to surround yourself with people who are willing to correct you, willing to challenge you, willing to confront you when you're experiencing temporary insanity. I can testify to the fact that my life would be very, very different if I didn't have people like that surrounding me to safeguard me from making some of the worst decisions of my life. My life has literally been saved by people who loved me enough to say, dude, you're being stupid right now, and you need to stop. You need that too. That's number 3. To become wise, we need to surround ourselves with people who are willing to correct us. But all of this hinges on number 4. And that is that we need to ask the Lord to correct us. To become wise, we need to ask the Lord to correct us. I'm ending with the beginning. Step 1 in seeking wisdom before you even talk to somebody else or hit the books or whatever is that you need to talk to the Lord. You need to say, Lord, I know very little. You need to say, Lord, my understanding is limited. My perspective is limited, so I need you to teach me. I need you to correct me. I need you to set me straight. And I'm opening myself up to whatever method you decide to use to do that. Whoever you send my way, I'm going to listen to them. Whatever you lead me to read up on or study, I'm going to take it seriously and listen to it. You need to go to the Lord and you need to say, I'm done demanding my own way. I am opening myself up to your way, so now correct me. My ears are open. I'm listening to become wise. We have to learn to accept correction. Now, I am fully aware that all of that may sound overwhelming, right? Everything we just described is an unbelievably long road, isn't it? And right now, we might feel like the road to wisdom is so long and so far off that there's no way to get there from where you are. There's no way to get from where you are to where you want to be, but that is not true. Because just like we talked about last week, the core truth at the heart of the Proverbs is the fact that you can change. I'm I'm going to say that again. The Proverbs tell us that we can change. You are not stuck where you are. God's wisdom is not a jar of cookies set up high on top of the refrigerator that you can't reach with your tiny little kid hands. No, God's wisdom is reaching out to you right now. He is holding it out to you right now. Wisdom is calling out to you in the streets saying, come follow my voice. Because when you pursue wisdom with a sincere heart, wisdom pursues you right back. And wisdom grabs hold of your hand, and wisdom starts to pull you onto the right path, step by step by step by step. And so even if the road to wisdom feels way too far off for you to ever even begin to reach right now, do not despair. We are in this together. We are pursuing wisdom together. We are going to spend these coming months pouring through God's revealed wisdom in the book of Proverbs so that we can apply his fatherly guidance to our lives as a community and then give him the glory when he transforms our lives for the better through it. And I cannot wait to come out the other side with all of you. And so before we respond in worship through song in just a moment, I want to close out, like always, by praying for you. And so if you would, bow your heads with me for just a moment and close your eyes. Let's pray. Father, we are here this morning because we desperately need your fatherly wisdom. You created the world. You know how the world is supposed to work. You know what is wise and what is foolish. You know what is right and what is wrong. You know what will lead us to flourish and thrive and what will lead us to suffer and struggle. You know what is good for us and what is bad for us. And in order to flourish in this world, we need to learn those things from you. We need to sit down on your couch and listen to your words of fatherly wisdom as you lovingly dispense them to us. And so I pray this morning that you will fill every single person in this room with an overwhelming desire to pursue your wisdom like their treasure. Cause us to treasure your wisdom above literally everything else. Make us like Solomon. When you went to Solomon and wrote him a blank check and said, ask me anything and I will give it to you. He didn't ask for wealth and he didn't ask for power and he didn't ask for you to destroy his enemies. He asked you to make him wise. Give us that same heart and desire this morning. And so as we go on this journey in these coming months, I pray that you will take every area in our life that is still ruled by the spirit of foolishness and you will subject it to your wisdom. Make us wise in the way we think about our friendships. Make us wise in the way we think about our money. Make us wise in the way we think about our work. Make us wise in the way we think about our government. Make us wise in the way we think about how we do business. Make us wise in the way we think about how we relate to the other people around us. Make us wise in the way we think about how to find a partner or a spouse. Make us wise in all of these areas of our life. Pour out your unimaginable blessings on us by giving us this profound wisdom so that everyone looking on from the outside will see the people at Mount Zion Baptist Church and be forced to say, the Lord has made them remarkably wise. And I want whatever it is that they have. glorify yourself in us by turning us from simple into wise. And all of God's people said, Amen. If you would now stand as we respond in worship through song.